Welcome to today's presentation on the Red D consensus paper. This was led by the clinical directors of the four major ballet companies in the UK and was published in BMJ Open Sport and Exercise Medicine. Relative Energy Deficiency in Sport, or REDS, is a broad spectrum syndrome that results from problematic low energy availability. When an athlete or dancer doesn't consume enough energy to support both their training demands and their basic physiological functions, multiple systems are affected. We're not just talking about bone health or menstrual function anymore. REDS impacts metabolism, immunity, cardiovascular function, psychological health, and more. The evolution from the female athlete triad to REDS was a crucial step because it recognized that this isn't just a female issue. It isn't just about three interconnected problems. It's a complex multi-system syndrome. This is particularly relevant to dance. Dancers face unique challenges. Training loads often exceed 30 hours per week. There are powerful aesthetic demands that can promote restrictive eating. And in many dance cultures, there's a deeply ingrained value placed on thinness. Meta-analyses have shown that dancers have a 3 times higher risk of eating disorders than non-dancers, with ballet dancers at the highest risk, over 16%. The purpose of our study was to take the existing REDS framework, adapt it specifically for dance, creating clear and practical guidelines for screening, diagnosis, and management. To achieve this, we used a rigorous consensus methodology, the RAND UCLA Delphi panel method, with normal group technique. This is a well-established approach for developing clinical guidelines when empirical evidence is limited, but expert opinion is strong. We established a steering group of 5 clinical directors and leads from four of our largest UK professional ballet companies. This group had been meeting weekly since 2020, so there was already a strong foundation of collaboration. We then assembled an expert panel of 20 individuals, all of whom accepted the invitation. This was a truly multidisciplinary group: sports medicine physicians, endocrinologists, rheumatologists, psychiatrists, psychologists, physiologists, dietitians, and physiotherapists. All had recognized expertise in both REDS and dance. In addition to the expert panel, we convened 6 focus groups. 4 of these were drawn from the expert panel and focused on specific topics: screening, diagnosis, risk factors and culture, and management. But crucially, we also had 2 patient and public involvement focus groups, one with 37 dancers from across the UK and one with 5 artistic leaders, artistic directors, and a chief executive officer from a major dance company. This ensured that the voices of those most affected were heard. We set our consensus threshold at a priori at 70% agreement, with out-of-scope responses excluded from the calculation. The process involved 7 stages. Stage 1, the steering group conducted a literature review covering publications from June 2012 to June 2022, using databases like PubMed, Embase, and Sports Discus. We also reviewed the existing care pathways from the 4 represented ballet companies. Stage 2, we developed a Delphi questionnaire across 4 domains: questionnaires, diagnosis, management, and risk factors. Stage 3, the expert panel completed round 1 voting independently with a 100% response rate. Stage 4, we held a face-to-face meeting with all 20 panel members, again 100% attendance. This meeting was co-chaired by the lead author and a colleague, and we used nominal group technique to ensure all voices were heard and no single individual dominated. We discussed the questions where consensus hadn't been reached and explored the reasoning behind different ratings. Stage 5, we conducted round 2, voting on 36 questions that hadn't reached consensus in round 1. Again, 100% response rate. Stage 6, we convened the focus groups to explore non-consensus items in greater depth. Stage 7, we produced the final consensus document and distributed it to 16 international dance medicine experts for endorsement. 12 responded and endorsed the findings, including major organizations like the International Association for Dance Medicine and Science and national ballet companies from across Europe and Australia. The expert panel reached consensus that questionnaires played a key role in RED-D diagnosis and management, with 76% agreement, and that they're useful for routine screening of asymptomatic dancers with 88% agreement. When we looked at specific questionnaires, there was consensus supporting the use of LEAF-Q for females at 81%, LEAM-Q for males at 75%, and the Dance-Specific Energy Availability Questionnaire, or DEAQ, also at 75%. For routine screening, LEAF-Q and DEAQ were both supported by 75% of the panel. But here's where it gets complicated. There was no consensus on the EDEQ, FAST, and the BEDAQ. And critically, when asked whether current questionnaires were appropriate for use in the dance due to issues of validity and specificity, only 29% agreed. Why is this? We identified a major challenge: social desirable bias. Dancers may not answer honestly because they fear the consequences. If they admit to amenorrhea or restrictive eating, they might be withdrawn from performances or casting. The dancer focus groups confirm this. They acknowledge that they were often untruthful when questioned about these topics. So our questionnaires are valuable. They need further validation in dance populations, and we need to create psychological safety for honest reporting. The diagnosis domain revealed strong consensus on several key indicators. There was an unanimous agreement, 100%, that functional hypothalamic amenorrhea is present in REDS females. Endocrinological blood tests were supported by 83% for understanding causes. Bone biochemistry assessment after a bone stress injury was supported by 92%. And importantly, bone mineral density assessment using DEXA was supported by 93% after 2 bone stress injuries. But the panel also agreed that it should be considered after a single injury. It is a high index of suspicion, with 85% consensus. Blood tests were seen as key in both diagnoses, with 100% agreement, and routine screening of asymptomatic dancers with 80% agreement. The panel also agreed that poor sleep quality at 84% and reduced libido in males, 79%, can help support a diagnosis. But some areas didn't reach consensus. Daily well-being scores, ECG investigation, and basal metabolic rate assessment all fell below the 70% threshold. Based on these findings, we developed the RED-D diagnostic pathway, shown here. Clear indicators that should trigger immediate investigation and secondary criteria. If a dancer presents with 3 or more secondary criteria, that also warrants investigation. This provides a practical, structured approach for clinicians. The management domain produced some of the most clinically actionable findings. There was unanimous agreement that increasing nutritional intake is the primary consideration in RED-D management, and that evaluating and modifying dance workload is equally important. Individual assessment of nutritional requirements relative to energy demands was supported by 95%. Importantly, the panel agreed that an endocrine and metabolic function will correct themselves if increased energy intake and management workload are followed. This gives us confidence that addressing the root cause is effective. For bone health, structured resistance training was anonymously supported, and vitamin D supplementation at between 1,000 to 2,000 international units per day was also anonymously supported as the best daily dose to maintain levels. Regarding menstrual function, the panel agreed that increasing energy availability is fundamental to restoring normal cycles, with 83% consensus. And critically, they agreed that the contraceptive pill should not be considered in Red D management. It masks the problem rather than addressing it. However, there are areas of non-consensus. Liquid meal supplements were not seen as superior to real food, and the use of biphosphonates or IGF-1 for bone restoration did not reach consensus. We developed the Red D management pathway, shown here, organized around 4 pillars: nutrition intervention, medical management, psychological support, and workload management. This reflects the multidisciplinary approach that is essential for managing this complex condition. The risk factors domain revealed some of the most powerful insights from our focus groups. There was unanimous agreement that the IOC risk management table should be adapted for dance, and that every company or school should have a Red D audit and action plan, as well as management and referral pathways. But what were the specific risk factors? The panel agreed that there's a lack of understanding that Red D is a risk factor in dance. A culture built on aesthetics and high workload each received 94% consensus. Underfueling and skipping meals was identified as risk factors by 100% and 82% of the panel, respectively. And some of the insights from our dance focus group also confirm this. They told us that education on Red D is highly inconsistent across schools. In some instances, maladaptive behaviors like restrictive eating are actually rewarded with praise, roles, and jobs. Scheduling is a consistent challenge. There are often limited opportunities to fuel adequately during a rehearsal or performance day. When on tour, both the cost and availability of nutrition are barriers, and they acknowledge that they often are untruthful when questioned about amenorrhea because they fear about being withdrawn from performance. The artistic leaders focus group revealed an interesting disconnect. While dancers perceive that the aesthetic demands are about the body shape, the artistic leaders spoke about being performance ready, focused on energy and artistic delivery. They acknowledged that scheduling is a challenge, and they highlighted the need for education at the school level. But interestingly, they didn't see a need for education at the artistic leadership level. These focus group insights informed our risk stratification and return to dance pathway, shown in future figures. This uses the dance injury and availability classification system, which is already familiar in the sector, to guide graduate return to full dance participation. Red D is a complex multi-system disorder that requires early identification and clear management strategies. Using rigorous consensus methodology, we've developed dance-specific pathways for diagnosis, management, and return to dance. What are the key takeaways for the practice? First, for clinicians, use the Red D diagnostic pathway and management pathway as practical tools. They're designed to be accessible and actionable. Second, for dance companies and schools, implement Red D audit and action plans. Establish clear referral pathways, create psychological safety so dancers feel comfortable being honest about their symptoms. Third, for educators, develop consistent education on Red D at the vocational school level. The dancer focus group told us that this is currently inconsistent and sometimes counterproductive. Fourth, for the culture, we need to shift the focus from aesthetic to performance ready. The artistic leaders spoke about this. They want dancers who are energized and capable, not simply thin. We need to bridge the gap between perception and reality. There are obviously limitations. Our expert panel was extensive ballet experience, so our findings may be more directly applicable to ballet. We need further research across dance genres. The outer scope option meant that for some questions, fewer panel members contributed, and consensus methodology, while valuable, doesn't replace empirical evidence. This work represents an important step forward. The endorsement we received from 12 international organisations, including the International Association of Dance Medicine and Science and the national ballet companies across Europe and Australia, tells us that the sector is ready for this guidance. The steering group will review emerging evidence and update these guidelines biannually. This is not a static document. It's a living framework that will evolve as our understanding grows. To get a full picture of this paper consensus, please go to the paper. It is free to access and will give you much more detail. Thank you.